शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि च मनसा स्वं चिन्वतामच्युतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. In this Friday Atma Vichara session from Ramanacentre for Learning Bangalore, we have been meditating on Bhagavan's Upadesham, which are captured for us in the book titled Ramana Answers, Self-Enquiry 1900-1950, which is a compilation of all the questions put to Bhagavan on Atma Vichara, self-enquiry, and Bhagavan's answers to them. This has been compiled for us by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji, and we have been looking at the questions put to Bhagavan between 1936 to 1950, and we have reached the 115th question in the book in this section. And after meditating on this week's question and answer by Bhagavan's grace, we will have a 20 minutes practice of Atma Vichara. Following that, our President Sarada Akka would be talking about self-enquiry as it has been contemplated in Ramana Gita, which is a Sanskrit compilation of question and answers put to Bhagavan by Ganapati Muni. And then finally, we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. In this question and answer, which is a continuation of the last week's question, and so I'll read the last week's question, and this week we will look at the next two set of questions which are connected. The devotee had said, when I am engaged in inquiry as to the source from which the I springs, I arrive at a stage of stillness of mind beyond which I find myself unable to proceed further. I have no thoughts of any kind, and there is an emptiness, a blankness. A mild light pervades, and I feel that it is myself bodiless. I have neither cognition nor vision of body and form. The experience lasts nearly half an hour and is pleasing. Would I be correct in concluding that all that was necessary to secure eternal happiness? Bhagavan says, this does not mean salvation. Such a condition is termed manolaya, or temporary stillness of thought. Manolaya means concentration, temporary temporarily arresting the movement of thoughts. As soon as this concentration ceases, thoughts old and new rush in as usual. And even though this temporary lulling of mind should last 1,000 years, it will never lead to total destruction of thought, which is liberation from the birth and death. The practicer must therefore be ever on the alert and inquire within as to who has this experience. This part has been highlighted by Appa, A.R. Natarajanji. The practicer must therefore be ever on the alert and inquire within as to who has this experience, who realizes its pleasantness. Failing this inquiry, he will go into a long trance or a deep sleep, yoga nidra. Continuing with that, the questioner asks, the devotee puts the next question, which is question number 115. But isn't the grace, Guru's grace or God's grace, necessary for one's progress in the vichara, inquiry? Question is, but isn't the Guru's grace or God's grace necessary for one's progress in the vichara? Bhagavan says, yes, but the vichara that you are making is itself the Guru's grace or God's grace. Then the devotee asks, I request you to bless me with your grace. Bhagavan says, go on with your inquiry. So we will look at these two questions this week. And the question is about the necessity of Guru's grace to progress in vichara. And Bhagavan says, and when the request further is made to bless with that such a grace, Bhagavan says, go on with your inquiry. So here it is in line with the Bhagavad Gita statement, we can say, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. And Bhagavan also has said that if we keep on practicing, the grace is vouched safe for those who are practicing. So it's very, very important for us as sadhakas to understand this. Our karma kshetra is only limited to practice. With full faith in Bhagavan, we have to continue to practice. Continue to do the vichara. And Bhagavan is saying that doing such vichara itself is only possible, it's because of the grace of the Guru or the God. It wouldn't have been possible otherwise. In fact, it is the grace which is running the whole show. Even when one was egoistically claiming that it is one's own doing, one's own ability, it was always the grace that was making it happen. But because of the individual idea and a strong sense of knowership and doership, we rise as an individual and claim that it was my doing, it was my knowing. But it is all along the God's grace. And talking about the grace, and in an incident which Akka also shared during Self-Enquiry workshop, I think it is with Bhagavan conversation with Munaganal that I believe so, when he says that I am unable, Munaganal Venkatramaya says so, that I am unable to, there are two ways, two paths that I understand as a devotee. One is that I be like a kitten and the mother cat will carry me and place me in the safest place. So I will be like a kitten. I have no idea how to do inquiry or how to surrender. I will simply be. And Bhagavan, you should carry me like a cat and place me in the safest place. Then the other path, which is also that he is aware of, which he says that it is like the baby monkey, which holds on to the mother monkey. And the mother monkey will jump from one branch or one building to another building. And though the baby monkey cannot make such a big leap, this mother monkey, when it does that kind of a leap, all of the baby monkey is also carried with it. So the only thing that the baby monkey has to do is hold on to the mother. So Munaganal Venkatramaya asks Bhagavan, I will be like a kitten. I can't even have the strength to hold like a baby monkey. I don't know whether I can strongly believe that I can hold on to you like a baby monkey. I think I don't even possess that kind of a strength. So I will be like a kitten. Let your grace carry me like the mother, like the cat. And Bhagavan very beautifully answers that you hold on to me like the baby monkey, and I will carry you like a cat. That means it is always, Bhagavan is saying here, karmanyevadikaraste, keep on practicing. And for those who are practicing, the grace is vouched safe for them. And therefore, it is those who will receive the grace and be taken away from this samsara to that truth. And talking about this, Nachurana Nachu Swamiji now talks about it. There are very few people who get the grace of the self from within, and therefore they need not read any Upanishads or any books or any guru, and they get to that state of the self. But for most of us, the external appearance of the God or the guru in some way and blessing us is very, very important. So here, knowing that Bhagavan has entered our life and knowing very well that Bhagavan is very clearly saying again and again to all of us that you keep on practicing, and that practice itself is my grace. So we need not even worry whether am I doing the practice right or not. The only thing that we need to do is keep on practicing with full faith in Bhagavan. And as we keep on doing it, Bhagavan says that very grace which made us do this will eventually carry us to the ultimate destination. And that destination, when we talk about God's grace, Guru's grace, and keep on practicing, often we think that this is something that will happen after some time or somewhere down the line. Because when we talk about doing, we always think about something that we keep on have to do over a period of time. But it is actually, and when we look at time, the time, as Venkatesh ji also very beautifully explained in the Self-Enquiry workshop, it is only in the now. That is all is the reality. There is no past and there is no future. It is just the moment now. And we can't even experience the now, because moment we try to experience it through the mind or the intellect, it already becomes a past, it becomes a memory. So it already always in the now, that is all is the truth. That means that grace which is making us do vichara in the now, that very grace in the now itself will make no movements to appear, no in and out movements happen. It makes us remain, abide in our true nature, in the now. So that is what is going to happen. Therefore, or if you look at it in another way, even when we are practicing self-enquiry, in the now, the mind is moving towards object, towards thought, towards body, towards some vague memory of the past or some vague desire towards the future. It is moving away from instead of abiding in the self. And moment we inquire by the very grace, to whom is this? Who am I? That very grace is establishing us in the now itself, in the self. So the practice, what Bhagavan has given, is actually the grace which is establishing us in the self. Every moment, every time we inquire, and because only in the now this abidance in the self is possible, that every time that we inquire, it is that we are in the steady state of the self. What can we ask for? Such a wonderful path has been blessed with such love by Bhagavan, where the path and the destination is one and the same. And it can only happen in the now, at this moment. And that is what has been given to us. Therefore, even if you look at it from that angle, the practice is the destination. And therefore, we should continue to practice. And Bhagavan is saying that practice itself happens because of His grace. So it is completely moment to moment, only His grace which is making us do at this and making us abide. This only false idea that I am doing it and I am abiding it, that wrong idea will be revealed to be unreal. So unreal that it is really doesn't exist. That is the true inquiry. To whom is this? When we say I, and we really inquire, who am I? We see that there is no such entity as I. What is only the self. And it's only by more and more practice, this clarity by that very grace, as Bhagavan says, Arunachala, you revealed the entire home as you took me inside. And this revelation that there is no real I. What is only the truth. And the inquiry and the final abidance is not two different things. And it is not something that we do. It is only by the grace that it is possible. It is the grace which makes us do the vichara. It is the grace which reveals the fullness of the self. And it all happens here and now. That is the path. Therefore, Bhagavan is saying, go on with the inquiry. That is the only thing that you need to do, is to say that you bless me with your grace. When Bhagavan is asked, he says, go on with the inquiry. Because the going on with the inquiry every moment to moment to moment is the true abidance. And when it becomes really effortless, when we recognize that the I is unreal and the what is only the self, then the karma also goes off by the very grace of the Bhagavan. With Bhagavan's abundant grace, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. For the next 20 minutes, let us practice Atma Vichara. Shri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana. Over to Sarada.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana. Shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of Ramana, by the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we in this part of the satsang meditate on the verses of Ramana Gita, which is a compilation in Sanskrit in 18 chapters of questions asked by several seekers of truth of Bhagavan Ramana and the answers given by him. These have been compiled by Ganapati Muni into these 18 chapters, and we are now meditating on the questions and answers, the questions of Kapali to Bhagavan Ramana in chapter 12, which is called Shakti Vichara. So Kapali's question was the question which we were dwelling on the previous time. Vyapara Ishwarasyayam Drishya Brahmanda Kotikrit Nityah Kimathava Anityo Bhagavan Vaktumarhasi Nityah Kimathava Nityo Bhagavan Vaktumarhati. He asked Bhagavan, see this creation which happens by the power of Bhagavan, power of Ishvara, is this Nitya? Is this movement? Is it real, or is the movement eternal, or is it not eternal? See, the activity of God, which we see as the creation, we say that Bhagavan says in Arunachala Pancharatnam, this entire universe is created in you, it is sustained in you, and it dissolves in you. Tvaya Arunachala Sarvam Bhutva Sthitva Pralinametat Chitram. So this is created in you, it is sustained in you, it dissolves in you. Is this activity of God, is it eternal? This is the question which Kapali is asking. See, this is the yearning or the question or the longing that we have to keep the activity sustained. We may say it is all God's power, but we want the activity to go on. We don't want the activity to stop altogether. We are worried about the cessation of karma. Paul Brunton also asked Bhagavan, if I come to know the self, will I become an idiot? Will I become stupid? Will I become incapable of action? So Bhagavan always reassures that that is not the case. However, what does this reflect actually? It reflects our faith in activity and not in the ground. We don't want a situation where activity is not happening, because we cannot in our current mode understand the magnitude, the magnificence or the beauty of simple being in which there is no activity. We cannot accept that it can be the best situation. So Kapali on our behalf is asking, is the activity of God eternal? Will it go on forever? Bhagavan says, Nijaya paraya shaktya chalannapya chalah para kevalam muni samvedyam rahasyamidam uttamam. In truth, the activity, the vyapara of the supreme power, chalana of paraya shakti, chalana api Achalaha Paraha. Though there appears to be movement, that is really speaking, it is unmoving. This secret can be understood only by the sages, says Bhagavan. Kevalam Muni Samvedyam Rahasyam Idam Uttamam. How to understand that in truth, something which is not moving at all is the cause and the sustenance of all the movement. How is it possible that something from which there is nothing apart, in that something can rise, something can be sustained, something can set? How is it possible? That is not possible for us to understand with the mind, which is limited. Only Anubhava, only the sages, only those who experience the truth and know that it is unmoving. It is unmoving. Why is it unmoving? It is unmoving because it cannot move anywhere. Movement requires space. You can move. See, I can move my hand from here to here, from one place to another. I can move my hand. Because my hand is originally not in the second place. Now, if my hand is in one A place, I can move it to B place. If it is in B place, I can move it back to A place, or I can move it to C place. So, this movement is possible because of the limited nature of the object that is moving. However, the self is all pervading. How can there be any movement in the self? Where to will the self go when the self is already everywhere? Where from can the self come when the self is already everywhere? How can the self move? Because it is all pervading. There is no place in which it is not for it to go there or to come from there into another place. So the self has to be unmoving. So what of all this activity? It is an appearance. It is a mere appearance. So this appearance, how does this appearance happen if we want to know? If we are interested, then Chalatvameva Vyaparo Vyapara Shakti Ruchyate Shaktya Sarvamidam Drishyam Sasarja Parama Puman. So, Bhagavan says that this is movement, right? This movement, this activity is termed Shakti. Chalatvameva Vyaparo Vyapara Shakti Ruchyate. So, this movement is activity. When there is movement, you see activity. If there is no movement, will we understand there is activity? In fact, in the stone also there is consciousness. But we say the stone is jada, it is inert. Why? Because we do not see any movement in the stone. Because we do not see any change. We, with our naked eye, with our limited perception, cannot see any change in the state of the stone. Therefore, we say that it is insentient. It's a non-living thing. But if we see movement, then we say, oh, there is activity. When something is absolutely still, we do not see the activity in that which is still, or we do not see the power in that which is still. So Bhagavan says only movement is activity, and that is only termed power. Chalatvameva Vyaparo Vyapara Shakti Ruchyate. That is called power. Shaktya Sarvamidam Drishyam Sasarja Parama Puman. So, all this which is seen, idam drishyam, that all this which is seen is created by the Supreme Person. By what? By Shakti, by His power. By His power alone, everything is happening. How can there be any other force or any other power? Because if there is anything that is outside of the Supreme's purview, how can we call Him the Supreme? So any power is only the power of the Supreme. And it is the power which makes the appearance of activity to happen. Vyaparastu pravrittischa nivritti cha dvida nivrittiriti cha dvida nivrittistha yatra sarvam atmaiva bhuditi shrutihi. So Bhagavan says activity is of two kinds. One is the rising and one is the subsidence. When everything rises also we see activity. When something subsides also we see activity. When it is simply staying in one place, we do not see activity. We do not see the change. When it rises, then something has happened, something new has started. This plant is begun to grow. So that is the rising pravritti, the movement outward. The outward movement is called pravritti, the movement towards the external. And nivritti is turning back, not moving towards the outside, being free of the external movement. So nivritti, this statement, Bhagavan says, this statement of the scriptures, sarvam atmaiva bhuditi. Sarvam atmaiva bhuditi. This is Shruti statement. This talks of subsidence of everything into the heart. When everything subsides, then everything has become the self. So there is, Bhagavan is saying there are two kinds of activities. One activity is external pravritti, moving towards the object. The other activity is moving back, nivritti, moving back towards the self. When one moves back towards the self, then what happens? Everything, all this has become the self. So when the mind moves towards the object, it is called the mind. When we turn it back, then it becomes self-enquiry. The mind's attention is turned backwards. When it is turned backwards, it is called self-enquiry. And what happens at that time? Sarvam, all this which is seen, everything which is perceived, atmaiva abhut, everything becomes the self. Iti Shrutihi, the Shruti says this, that everything becomes the self. Nanatvam dvaita kalastham gamyate sarvamityatah. Because the mind is divided, because there is a dualistic approach. The moment I take myself to be a body, I limit the I, the self, to this body, and everything outside this body, I say, is not I. So there is this dualistic approach. Within this body, I. Outside this body, not I. So at that point of time, when we see multiplicity because of Dvaita, then Bhagavan says we have to use the word. The scripture uses the word Sarvam. All this is the self. It uses the word Sarvam because of the duality. When the duality ceases, when we inquire, who am I? For whom is this thought? For whom is this multiple vision of seeing the world with its various objects. For whom is this? For me. The moment I answered for me, the multiplicity would have disappeared. Even there, Nanda Kumarji often says, even there the attention comes to a single power. All this is for me. So we have to say there is something outside all, and it is for me. Abhuditi padenatra Vyaparakopi gamyate. All this has become the self. When we say it, there appears to be an activity of everything becoming the self. But what is actually the truth? The truth is that neither is there anything that is apart from the self. So this entire duality, the perception of duality is flawed. When the mind goes outward, it creates an external world, because already Bhagavan told us in the 9th chapter on Granthi Veda, he has told us that the power of the self rises from the heart, it goes to the Sahasrara, from Sahasrara it spreads through the entire body. When that happens, Manuja samsari bhavet, he told us. We become worldly because we start thinking, this is where the I is, this is where I am this body, and that is the world. So, this multiplicity is posited because of the existence of duality. And because we say there are many things, we have to say when it subsides, everything has become the self. So, as if something can become the self, is it in the first place apart from the self? Is the I thought apart from the self? Are the other thoughts apart from the I thought? Therefore, is anything apart from the self? Nothing is apart from the self. Therefore, it is said there is no movement, there is no duality, there is no multiplicity. But I say, oh, I am experiencing it, Bhagavan. Then he says, all right, if you are experiencing it, then understand that all this rises from a single power. And because you say there is multiplicity, I read the Shastra tells, all this becomes the self. It subsides into the self. And then the self alone remains. So in Atma Vichara, Bhagavan allows us to question the thought because we believe that there are thoughts. We believe there are a multiplicity of thoughts. But if we start examining the nature of thought, what will we find over there? What is the thought made up of? Is it not made up of pure consciousness? Every thought is only an image of light. It's only an image within us. So we see multiplicity. And then when we inquire, oh, for whom? Then who am I? What happens at that point of time? When only the consciousness remains, then everything merges back into the self. And we have to say, everything merged into the self. But was there in truth something called everything? There is no everything. When everything is a self, how can you say A self and B self and C self and D self? It is only our saying that these are all separate is only on account of illusion. But once one has understood everything to be the self and the self alone, then there will be no division, there will be no confusion, there will be no desire for anything, because there is nothing apart from oneself to desire. There will be no fear because there is nothing apart from oneself to fear. So Bhagavan is indicating, he says there are two kinds of activity. No, there is one activity of going outward and there is one activity of going inward. So Dileep was telling us how Bhagavan says, you must do your part of the duty. You must hold on like the baby monkey. So we must hold on to the inward path, the Nivritti Marga. Bhagavan says inward, inward, inward is the way. So we have to get keeping on getting back. One realizes then slowly that this multiplicity doesn't exist at all. Because within us, in the thoughts, everything is a thought. Everything is a thought. And how can one thought be different from another? In nature, in content, it may be different. In appearance, it may be very varied. But in nature, it's all the same. It's all the self alone. So this is what Bhagavan is indicating to us, that the power, even when we know that everything is happening by the power of the Supreme, knowing this, on the one hand, it relieves us completely. We don't have any responsibilities. We can simply remain in the self. And on the other hand, there is nothing to fear either. There's nothing to be lost, because everything is the self alone. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri.
Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukhavariraşe Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gaviram Chinta Vihinam Hૃdi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hૃdi Chintayami.